Good morning, everybody. Thanks for having me this morning. I had the privilege of doing Minneapolis, St. Paul, 1 million cups last week, in Eden Prairie the week before that. So this is week number 3, and kudos to you guys. They all start at 9 o'clock, but you guys are early risers and start at 8:30. So congratulations on that accomplishment. So who are we? That's myself on the left and my business partner, Gene O'Brien. We are what we call an idea stage investor. And I'll get to what that means here in a little bit. My own background, I've been around for 30, 35 years, mostly in the software industry. I've done probably 20 to 25 different startups, mainly in the enterprise-wide software space and e-commerce space. The last 30 years, I've done some IPOs, all sorts of experiences, primarily again in sales and marketing. My partner, Gene, who could not be here this morning, he's a mechanical engineer by education, and he operates and owns a precision metal fabrication company up here in the Twin Cities, Chaska to be specific. We met a long time ago in the football field, and we're both passionate alums from the University of Minnesota and big Golden Gopher football fans. So where do we fit in the investment world? So again, we're an idea stage investor. So we want to come in and help entrepreneurs and inventors take their idea off the cocktail napkin, so to speak, and get it through the validation phase and the prototyping phase and get them ready to launch their business, which is usually a hard time to raise money. Angels and venture capitalists typically will say, hey, come back to me when you've got a real product in the market. We want to fill that gap from idea to launch when the larger money typically comes into play. So think of us in that arena. What's going on here? There we go. So what is our investor model? So we're kind of do 3 different things. We build prototypes, which I'll get into our process here in a few minutes. We're an investor, and we're a manufacturing incubator. So I'm sure most of you have heard of the incubator concept before, which is really big in the software world, where we take typically young software entrepreneurs and coders and incubate them into a company to get them ready to launch their product. We built out the same sort of functionality for people in the manufacturing space. So who do we work with? Again, we're looking for companies and people at the idea stage. Cocktail napkins, crude models, detailed designs, what have you, and we will help mature those ideas and get them into real products. We're industry agnostic. Again, we're a physical product play. We're not a software or services play. We are industry agnostic, but clearly we do very well, given Gino's experience in manufacturing and his facilities in the hard goods space. Think industrial, commercial, think hard tech. We do a lot of work in the telecommunications space, building cabinets for fiber optic. You see them on the roadside. You see big cabinets on the roadside that are hubs for all the internet connections. We build those for large corporations. And we typically are working with partners that are either working on or have applied for a patent. We've got several people we're working with right now. We're actually helping them probably file some patents in the next couple of weeks on some products because they don't have much experience in that realm. We have a lot of patent experience and so forth. So we usually work with people that are in that phase as well. So what do we provide? We'll create blueprints, engineering documents and specifications, material selection and descriptions. And then we go through what we call a 11x4 prototyping phase. So phase 1 is, does the darn thing work, right? Does it work to the specs that we have on the engineering documents? Phase 2 is what we call the destruction test. We usually make 2 of those, and we try to beat the crap out of them, figure out their fail points, especially if it's an industrial type of application. We've got to figure out where that thing's going to fail. Phase 3, we build 3 prototypes for field testing. And then phase 4 is we build 5 final version prototypes in what we call the pre-manufacturing phase. So after we get those field testing results back and input from consumers and so forth, we'll build out another set, retest them in the field, and that's when we say, okay, now we're ready to go to manufacturing. At that point in time, we create bid-ready manufacturing specs for a partner, and they can bring those out to multiple manufacturers, including Gino's company, or we're agnostic on this point. And then we also will help build their go-to-market strategy, which is where I come in and really help the inventor and the entrepreneur understand what the best way to bring this to market is. I work with a lot of inventors, had a couple calls earlier this week where they had great ideas, really cool product ideas, but really had no maturity in terms of how they're going to actually sell it. And before we take on a program as an investor, we're going to obviously want to understand quite clearly, and I'm willing to help a lot, is how you're going to actually monetize this idea or this product. So what is our model? We don't charge for services, okay? We negotiate a success model on the back end, and that could either be in revenue share or in an equity participation. And we will also put cash in this as well. So we're very flexible. We're here to support entrepreneurs and inventors and get their ideas to reality. And we can do this in a very flexible way. We don't have any other investors involved, just Gene and myself. So we move relatively quickly, and we don't have a lot of rules at this stage of the game. We just launched this model a couple of months ago, maybe not even that, about a month ago. And we're very flexible as to how we negotiate these agreements. So how can you help? How can the 1 Million Cups community help? We are looking for connections and so forth for inventors and entrepreneurs, and also into the VC and early stage angel guys. I'm having lunch with a new fund here in the Twin Cities, and we're a perfect fit. So we kind of work with entrepreneurs and inventors on that first stage, and they want to come in as a hybrid PC or VC-PE and bring in money once they get that product to market and get it launched. So that's what you guys can do for us. And there's my contact information. And I was told to keep it to 6 minutes, so I think I'm a little bit over. So I'm going to open up for Q&A.
Awesome. Thank you, Tom. I'll have you pull your screen down for a little bit during Q&A, and then at the end of Q&A, we can put your contact information back up. If anyone has questions for Tom, please feel free to use the raise your hand function, and I can call on you, or you can type your question in chat. Tom, if people do type their question in chat, I'll still call on them to read it out loud, so for the benefit of the people that have tuned in via Facebook Live.
Okay, yeah, so good question. That's a holdover slide from a previous meeting that I forgot to take out, or that bullet. That is a product that is in our system right now. It's called the tilt brake. It's running non-disclosure, and I didn't realize it was in here until I put the last slide up and saw that I'd left it in from an earlier slide. So that is technically an NDA situation with a client of ours, so I can't talk about it. So my apologies for that error. But you'll probably hear about that after the first of the year sometime.
Tom, I have a question for you on behalf of
Yes.
A student who's not able to be here today. I'm working with a student entrepreneur who has an invention that he and a couple of his buddies have built. It's a neat working prototype. But they don't know how to go to the next level, right? They've got this nice working prototype. They can demonstrate that it functions. They've jerry-rigged it out of, all sorts of parts and pieces that they bought from other places and got it to work.
Sure.
And he just recently actually contacted me saying, okay, so now how do I find out how much it would cost to mass produce this?
Sure.
Can you help somebody like that? And could you talk about what the first things would be that you would advise him to do?
Yeah, so I would love to work with them. That's exactly what we are trying to help people. Love to help students specifically. So we have a process. If you go to our website, there's a whole page on and you can send your student there. We have an initial, phone conversation or Zoom conversation, understand what they're trying to do. If we like it, we go immediately into non-disclosure agreements. And then we will dive in deeper and advise them on sort of the right way to get it. Without knowing what the product is, I don't want to say too much. I don't want to step out of turn here, but I would encourage them to contact me. We'll set up a call with Gene, and we will talk about how we can give them the advice they're looking for and see if they want to use us as a partner to help them do that. But generally, again, it's is it a $1, $1 widget you buy at the drugstore, or is it a new refrigerator? It's hard for me to answer all that without having some semblance of what it is, but we'd be more than happy to talk to him about it for sure.
Awesome. I see that Mike has a question. Mike, do you want to turn your mute off and ask your question?
Yeah, sure. So on the model part, you said that there was no charge for services,
Correct.
and there was a negotiated model of success for the revenue upon the product. So I was a little bit curious about what the specifics of like the revenue share would normally be, and then I was wondering if there was other parts of that model that I missed by chance.
No, you didn't miss anything. The other thing I did there was the third bullet was a cash component as well.
Okay.
So we don't have a preconceived notion as to how much we want in terms to make it a success for us. Our primary goal here is to actually we really want to help entrepreneurs and inventors. We're not necessarily in this to make a gazillion dollars. We're not a typical VC that needs a 5x return in 5 years. We don't have any of those models. We sincerely actually want to help people succeed. And the equity or revenue share is completely open for negotiation. I tell people you're probably looking at sub 10% kind of thing. So it's not massive. Again, we're trying to really first and foremost help people out and negotiate what makes sense and what's fair to the entrepreneur to be successful.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome, Mike.
Gary has a question.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. So, and I may have missed it. I apologize, Tom.
Sure.
How long have you been doing it? And in that time frame, those that have actually come to market, I'm sure there's some in the bucket right now that you can't really talk about as you referenced, but maybe then if you can, those are your successes that.
Sure. Right now we don't have any. So the website went live 5 weeks ago, and you're the third group we've talked to. So this is a fresh model. So I don't have any success to talk about so far. What I can tell you is that based on the Eden Prairie 1 Million Cups meeting 2 weeks ago today, I have 7 different entrepreneurs and inventors sort of in process. And then based on Minneapolis last week, we've got 1 more. We're also incubating our own product within Minnetonka Labs. So Gene also has a patent on something that we're incubating right now as our own. We're a customer of ourselves, so to speak, if you would. But I don't have anything I can talk about right now. Everything is under an NDA situation, so I really can't. We're new. This is a new idea, a new model, and ask me in a year, and I hope we'll have a long list for you, Gary.
Sure, and with the, having had some conversations with the inventors and so forth, they're always very protective of their ideas. So maybe you can just talk a little bit about how you ensure that you're not going to steal their idea, scoop them and kick them to the road. What do you put in place? Maybe give a little more detail for that of what you do and ensure a trust relationship with someone who does bring an idea to you.
Sure. And that cuts both ways too, right? So we put NDAs in place after the initial meeting, right? And then in our agreement, right, the agreement between Minnetonka Labs and the inventor, our agreement has those protections in there for the inventor. But it also goes the other direction, right? What we don't want to do is put in a situation where we do a bunch of work, we spend a bunch of money, build 4 or 5 prototypes, and then the inventor says, I just took a full-time job down at the Taco Bell down the street, and I'm not going to do this anymore, right? So it goes both ways. So that's how we handle it. We handle it. We think we've got it covered from that perspective. It hasn't been an issue so far. I don't think it will become an issue, but it's certainly not our intent, and certainly not what we're doing this. We're not in that situation in life where we got to go steal people's ideas. We're here sincerely trying to help out entrepreneurs and inventors. But
Thanks, Tom.
Yep. Thanks for the question, Gary.
Yvonne has a question.
Yeah, I said, I'm wondering if where you're telling your story in the area, kind of how you're marketing this, it's
Sure.
brand new, 5 weeks. Have you
Sure.
been to the Inventors Network meeting that happens monthly in Hopkins?
I believe I am on the docket for November's meeting. I've been talking to Mike Dumond. Him and I, in fact, I changed emails this morning. They have a board meeting this afternoon, and they're going to make their decision on the presenters today on that next meeting. So yes, I know about that one. Right now, this is all I've done. And again, we're just starting this thing out. So we're still new at it. I would be open for any ideas, suggestions. I'll be obviously, promoting this to my own network. I haven't even done that yet. I've got a pretty substantial LinkedIn community and personal email database that will be rolling this other thing out too. We do want to keep it somewhat local to the upper Midwest, call it the Minnesota, Dakotas, Iowa, and eastern or western Wisconsin is sort of a geographical area. I don't want to, I'm not looking for people and work with in Colorado. I really want to keep this, in the upper Midwest. But yeah, if you've got any other networking communities like this, of, I'd love to hear, get a referral from you, Yvonne. Thank you.
Lindsay has a question.
I was wondering how you're going to adapt your market strategy for your clients during the pandemic. How that might differ for their inventions with everything so different in general.
Well, yeah, it certainly depends on what the invention is, right? So it depends what the product is. We've got a gentleman who's got an idea. I can say in the golf market is all I can talk about right now. I don't really see it changing too much as I think through examples of who we're talking to. I think given the news this week with Pfizer and the vaccine news has come out, I think that probably by spring, June is kind of, I think they're saying the first responders should have this stuff and the senior citizens, probably in January, and then the rest of the country towards the early part of summer. So I think this thing will get us back to somewhat by normal in 6 months or so, is my guess and hope. But I don't see it really, the pandemic hasn't changed what we're doing. We just started 5 weeks ago in the middle of the pandemic. So there's really not much to adopt to on our part right now.
Tom, I have a question for you, and I'll apologize if you address this in your presentation. As I MC, sometimes I miss portions of the presentations.
Okay, Ryan.
You mentioned that you come in at the idea stage and you're helping with prototyping. Do you get people to that minimum viable product that they can sell, or does it stop at prototype and then they take it to the level of something that can actually be sold?
No, you didn't miss that. The answer is yes. We want to get right to the point in time where this entrepreneur wants to go into full-fledged manufacturing, right? Mm-hmm. So in that 4 phases of the prototyping process, I clearly by phase 3, you're at an MVP stage. Mm-hmm. That you can go out and you can show it to customers, field test it, whatever the application might be. In theory, sell one of those. But the idea is really to get them through that whole process where they say, okay, now I need to go build 5,000 of these things, and we'll build those bid documents, right? Those RFQ documents as part of our service, is build out those documents, and then we can take that RFQ and push that out to, how many ever vendors, potential manufacturers we want to partner with.
Okay, and then another question, and maybe this is too much into the weeds, but I'm just curious. Sure. Are you gaining equity in these companies or doing like a royalty type arrangement on the product?
It can be either a revenue share, mm-hmm. or an equity share, or some combination of the two.
Okay.
Again, I'm totally flexible on that. We don't have any preconceived that we need 12% of this or whatever it is. We're very flexible based on the situation at hand.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
But as I said earlier, it's probably going to be sub 10%. Again, it depends upon how much we believe, and I believe the thing can be sold and generate revenue. So part of my role as a sales and marketing guy is doing market sizing, right? Understanding what is out there in terms of the market. What is the right strategy? Is it online, offline distributors, channels, all those types of things, and they really help build out a 3-year, revenue pro forma, right? And then we'll look at that and say, okay, well, we're going to put in roughly X amount of energy and calories and expertise and manufacturing services to get you to that MVP product. And we think this thing can generate $2 million in 3 years. And we'll do some general high level math and say, here's what we think is a fair deal, and negotiate from that.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense?
Yep. Looks like Ivana has a resource for you.
Okay, great, Yvonne, thank you.
And then Gary had a question.
Yes, and I'm assuming, but I didn't hear him mention it. Have you identified all the incubators in the state of Minnesota and made connections or plan to make connections with them?
Gary, I know a couple of them. I don't know them all yet. That's on my list of kind of research. So if you've got any suggestions or ideas, I would love to get them from you.
I don't have a lot of strong connections, and no, it appears to me in conversation, Red Wing, Ignite, and Yvonne probably knows more about them, but they seem pretty successful and well established. And then another resource, since you really are looking at hard products manufacturing, maybe a conversation, I'm sure your partner is well aware, maybe has connections with them already. Enterprise Minnesota, I've talked to them, and maybe there's some way, obviously they want to promote manufacturing and manufacturing in Minnesota, that they may be very open to try to help in some way connect to expedite more manufacturing.
Sure. Awesome. Thank you for those ideas.
And
Appreciate
we're getting
it.
to the 9 o'clock hour. I do want to let people know, unfortunately, our second presenter had some difficulties pop up and wasn't able to remain on the call. So if we have extra questions for Tom, we have a couple more minutes and we can stay on with Tom. If I don't see any questions come in, we'll go into community news and we'll come up with another activity for the second half of this. But it looks like Sarah has another question for Tom.
Yes, Tom, can you talk a little bit more about your background prior to Minnetonka Labs and why or how you guys decided to start this company?
Sure. So I graduated from the University of Minnesota in the early 80s. And in 1986, I went to work for 3M out of college, big manufacturing, mother mining company here in St. Paul, or over in St. Paul, I should say. I was there for about 18 months and realized that I was not a big company guy. I didn't like bureaucracy and all the structure and rules. And so I then, by sheer luck, I didn't know what a PC was at the time. But in 1987, I hooked up with a software company in upstate New York that had at the time just bringing to market what we now know as Microsoft Office. But it was a word processor and an email and a calendar and a spreadsheet for DOS. You know what DOS is, some of you young students out there. This is in the late 80s. And that really, back in those days, things moved really, really fast from a technology standpoint. And I was involved in a bunch of different new ventures through the 90s, all really in the groupware and email industries. So we take email for granted now. Back in the 1990s, that was really, really hard to do. And I was with several companies in Massachusetts and in New York and in California that really kind of fine-tuned the fine art of email and calendaring and messaging long before it was what it is today. A couple IPOs in there on the West Coast. Then most of the last decade, from 2000 to 2010, I was executive VP of sales at a company called Digital River. Maybe some of you have heard of that company. It was a very, very, very successful public company in the e-commerce space. We were the company that basically took software and moved it all online. So if you remember the old days of box software at Best Buy or Staples, all that software is gone. We're the people that took that up on the internet. And then I did some consulting. I had my own consulting business for a few years. And then about 2 years ago, Gino and I were talking. We live near each other, and with all the movement to bring manufacturing back to the United States, this is pre-COVID, Gino and I talked about building a manufacturing company. to sort of, get in on the, let's move things back to the States. And so we said, let's do this. Let's do something someday together. And about 3-4 months ago, right in the middle of COVID, I met several entrepreneurs in this sort of stage where they had an idea but did not know what to do about it. And Gino and I, over several nights and beers and whatnot, came up with this model. I've helped raise money in the past. I've done several rounds of fundraising myself as an executive at software companies, including being twice an officer of 2 publicly traded companies. So I understand how the whole thing works. And we decided to go downstream because I know that it's really hard for inventors and entrepreneurs, especially students, to get that first step on that journey. That's sometimes the hardest. And so that's where we want to hone in, is to help with that very first step, and not necessarily be late stage investors. There's plenty of VCs and PE guys out there, but there's this gap in here where what I call the idea stage that we really want to focus on.
Awesome. We have a question from Dustin, and then we've had a couple of questions come in on the Facebook live stream. So once we get Dustin's question, then I'll ask those questions from the Facebook stream.
Morning. Sorry about that. Good morning. So there's 2 parts of this question. One of them is not a question, and the other one is. So I have a guy that I'm working with right now that he's trying to build a prototype for, and I think you'd be a great candidate for that. Okay. And I also have an idea as well too, so I'll get in touch with you later on today. But my question is with this is, so when you look at a prototype and you're looking at what the cost and all this stuff is going to be to come up with the prototypes and so forth like that, how do you figure out how much that's going to cost in the long run? Meaning, like, do you go off of basically how many hours it took, or do you just go off of just like the basic, like, this is what we charge for, as like a kind of like a what's the best word to put that? Can't think of it now, but just like a or is it just like, dang it.
That's okay. I think I know your question, Dustin. Let me try to answer it. I think it's, we'll look at a deal and say, okay, this thing, we got to build this, 10 versions of this coffee cup. Mm-hmm. Gino's done this. My buddy Gino, he's done this enough times in his 35 years running this business. He does a lot of prototyping for his big corporate clients. And he does work for Verizon and Clearfield Communications and big companies, right? Mm-hmm. And they come to him and say, build prototype for this cabinet or whatever it might be, right? So he's done this enough time where he can pretty quick, Tom, that's going to cost us $100,000 between materials, time, obviously our own intellectual property and experiences got some value, got value to it as well. But it'll be generally, I would say it's more one of these, thumb in the air, looks about like this. Okay. Then, here's this long itemized list of time and so forth.
Okay.
I guess that's how it answers the question.
Yes, it did. So thank you very much for helping me out on that one. Thanks.
Awesome. And then the questions that came from Facebook, Yvonne also pasted them into this chat. So one question, this is from Sam Ziegler with Green Scene. Do you feel comfortable with the ag sector, or are you specialized in other sectors?
No, as my slide said, we are industry agnostic. So it's not, we don't shy away from anything. I'd love to do something in the ag business. I think it's a critical part of our economy here in Minnesota. I've been following some ag tech stuff over the years as a software guy, as people are now doing all sorts of really cool things with software to help the farming community. It's been really cool to kind of, check in on that stuff. So I would love to do something in the ag sector. Absolutely.
Awesome.
Yeah, we're industry agnostic. The only thing we're not going to do right now is software, right? Even though my whole life has been software, that's not what this thing is set up to be. It's meant to be, again, durable hard goods, industrial commercial applications. Certainly anything in the ag space, I would imagine, would fit really well into that criteria.
Okay. And then for some context around the next question, it looks like that was submitted around when you were talking about how you don't have this set, we need to get a 5X in 5 years like a traditional VC. And he asked, what is your why? Why not chase high returns on your time and resources?
Why not? Well, everybody wants high return on high resources. So I shouldn't, don't want anybody to walk away thinking Tom doesn't want to have a high return on what he's doing. But I say that in the sense that a lot of investors that are, again, venture capital, PE firms, they have a very rigid set of investment guidelines. And that is there because their investors want to know what the criteria of the fund is, right? So most VC funds will come to somebody like myself and say, can you put in 50 grand a year into this fund, right? They then have all those investors to answer to. In our case, it's just Gene and I, right? It's just Gene and I. And so if we see something that's really cool, we really like it, we love the entrepreneur, we love the inventor, we really want to help them. If we make 2X in 6 years, it's not the end of the world to us. So yeah, of course we want to make as much money as possible, but it's not the lens in which we're looking at this project through. We're looking at it through a different lens than that. And again, part of it is just because just the two of us, and I don't have other investors that I have to answer to.
Awesome.
Does that help answer that question? Whoever asked that question out in Facebook land?
Yeah, I'll see if he has a comment come in. And then, the other half of the question is, the what is your why?
Sure.
How would you answer that part of it?
See, you stalled there for a second. Can you ask that question again,
Yep.
Ray?
The other half of the question, aside from the why not chase higher, the high returns, he said, what is your why? Why do you do what you do?
Our why is we really sincerely want to help entrepreneurs and inventors get through that first leg of the journey. We've seen a lot of people try this and fail. I've been personally part of multiple failures myself. I just got done with a failure, a 2-year journey that we had to close up and shut down, and I failed. And part of our challenge was that we were in market generating revenue, and we still couldn't raise capital because we weren't further enough along our journey where the VCs and late stage angels were comfortable. They always went, well, call me back in 6 months when you got 2 million in revenue, or
Nicely that you could share with the group.
I would say, and this is a personal one for me, my last one that I failed on, I as a born and bred sales guy, I advocated the sales process to somebody else. And I think part of the reason why that company failed is that I personally was not engaged enough in selling. And that was a big takeaway from my last failure is I kind of hired some salespeople and kind of let them go do their thing. And I, as the CEO, was too busy playing CEO, trying to raise capital and not actually trying to raise revenue from paying customers. And that's probably the biggest mistake I made is I spent most of my time trying to find investors instead of trying to find customers. And if I did that one all over again, I would probably do that for sure. I think the second thing I would say that I've learned over my lifetime is, and I see this in myself and see this with inventors, is you got to be able to take the personal opinion out of the equation, right? I got an idea. I think it's the greatest idea in the world because it's my idea and everybody's going to love it no matter what. And what happens is you spend a lot of time and money trying to develop an idea that maybe really isn't that good and is not sellable, can't generate any revenue because it's your idea. You think it's so great, you can't see past that, right?
Okay.
That's what I see the most frequent way people are failing these startups. They
Right.
believe in something that's not really real.
Thanks, Tom.
You're welcome, Gary.
And thank you, Tom. I'm going to have you put your contact information back on the screen. And if we can have one of the organizers ask her final 1 million cups question. I'll also note that Lindsay put another resource in the chat, and that's the podcast, How I Built This by Guy Raz. So if anyone wants to check that out, that's a good podcast.
So Tom, as you're building this new venture, what can we as a community do to help you?
Yeah, again, it's just it's connections to inventors and entrepreneurs that have ideas, like Yvonne, the student that you talked of, the ag example. That's how you can help. Is just, hey, if you run into people with ideas and inventor that want to bring things to life, we want to hear about them. And same with early stage VCs and angels that like an idea, but they won't get into it until there's proof of concept and a minimal viable product and maybe even some early revenue. We want to talk to those people because, again, I think we fit very nicely into, if I go back to this chart right here, if you can think about one thing from Minnetonka Labs today, is this is really where we fit, is in these first three stages. And so the VCs, the business angels, the PE firms were a great way to front end a deal with those organizations. I think that's a really good place for us. So those would be the two things that I would appreciate. And I see all the information on the chat box. So thank you for all those ideas that I've been copying and pasting it as I've been talking, so we don't lose it when we get hung up here. So I appreciate that. And there's my contact information, tom@minnetonkalabs.com. And that's my cell phone number there as well. Please don't hesitate to reach out if you have a question or idea. We enjoy just talking and meeting new people every day and hearing about cool ideas. And it's really, to us, that's really the fun part about doing this.